So in today's gospel reading, we have a very famous passage. So the first chunk is from the very beginning of Luke's gospel. That's why it sounded so weird. Luke was speaking in the first person. I'm writing this account, okay? But then he jumps into the fourth chapter of Luke's gospel, which is the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. Right, so the first couple of chapters of Luke are what's called the infancy narrative. So it's talking about Jesus being born, the angel Gabriel showing up, all that sort of stuff. Very famous stories. But chapter 4 is where Jesus' public ministry begins. Great. In this scene, though, Jesus explains, here in Nazareth, here in the synagogue of his hometown, Jesus tells us why he has come. And how does he do it? What does he do to do that? He reads from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Not always what you'd think you'd do, but that's what he does. Why? Because he's reading the section of Isaiah that, like, if you're going to put a little title above it, it would say, like, job description of the Messiah. It'd be like, here's the mission statement of the Messiah, the one who is to come. God's been promising someone would come. The Christ, the Messiah. This is this person that's been promised. And his job description, people already know it. So, also, just before this story, you remember a couple of weeks ago when Jesus got baptized? Remember that scene? Very famous. The Spirit descends upon him. Great. The Spirit comes upon him. Right after that, right, then we're told the Spirit drives him out into the wilderness. Then today we heard, in the power of the Spirit, he comes back into Nazareth. And then he reads from the scroll of Isaiah that says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. So it's like, here's this prophecy being fulfilled. We've had it beaten over our heads at this point. Spirit of the Lord, it's upon me. Here we go. But then our question should be, so what? What are you going to do, man? What you going to do? And that's what Isaiah then tells us. And that's why Jesus repeats this. He tells us, well, here's what the Messiah is going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. Why have I come? To bring glad tidings to the poor, to proclaim liberty to captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free. We typically, as Catholics, we don't say all that all at once. We typically summarize it with one word. Fancy church word. You want to guess? We use a lot of fancy church words. The fancy church word we use to summarize this passage is the word salvation. Ever heard that word? A very famous church word, salvation. This is what the Christ brings. He brings salvation. Okay, but that word, and anyway, what salvation though is, what Jesus says is, I'm going to enter into all those broken parts of our life, like those dark places. I'm going to enter into those places of poverty, into those places of blindness, so our human frailty. I'm going to enter into those places of captivity, of fear, of all that sort of stuff. That's what Jesus does. He brings salvation to that. The word salvation, it comes from the Latin word salvus, which means health. It doesn't mean save, it means health. Or we get the English word salve from it. You know that thing like you rub on a wound when you're hurt or something? Salvation. Salve, it means health. So it's intimately bound up with this idea of health and healing. That's what Jesus brings. This salvation that Jesus brings isn't just like some get out of hell free card. That's a different thing. That'd be with the word redemption. That's a different church word we use. But salvation, that's the word that has to do with healing, restoring wholeness to us. Like I mentioned last week on February 9th, so here in a couple of weeks, we're going to begin our spring series called Renewing. We did rerouting, reconnecting, now we're doing renewing. Renewing, though, it's centered on this theme of healing. Okay, this healing that Jesus brings to us, that he promises to us, that we can experience, right? It's something real. It's not just like a churchy word that we can think about. Like, it's something real that we can experience. But the secret, I'm going to spoil it, the secret for it, if we want that, if we want this healing that Jesus brings to us, there's one simple precondition for it all. You have to encounter him. That's it. Secret's exposed. Like, you have to encounter, you have to be in his presence. If we want that, when Jesus is around, things change. You remember last week we had the very famous story of the wedding feast at Cana? Water into wine, Catholics love it, all that sort of stuff. Remember that? Okay. What's going on there? What's the number one factor that had to be there for that water to change into wine? Jesus. Okay, easy answer. Good job. Same thing, though, with us. It sounds stupid to say it out loud, but it's true. You have to say it. If we want to experience that something that Jesus promises us, well, we have to encounter him. We have to run up against him at some point and meet him, be in his presence, encounter him. So the simple question then, because I stay awake at night, like thinking about the objections you're going to have for me and be like, Father, but... I know what you're going to say already. It's like, Father, but... You're going to be from Long Island in this example, okay? Father, I know that, but guess what, Father? I've been going to Mass my whole life. I've been receiving the Eucharist my whole life. I've run up against Jesus in baptism, first communion at least, confirmation. I've been around Jesus. God's everywhere, isn't he, Father? I don't feel any different. I've encountered him, but nothing's changed for me. I don't feel this healing that you're talking about. I've already met him, but like what gives? Or you're probably sitting there also thinking, again, I stay awake at night thinking about these things. You're also probably thinking, I'm fine. But Father, Sally's been going to Mass for 10 years, decades she's been going to Mass. She's been receiving the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity, encounter with Jesus all the time. And Father, you know Sally. Sally's a real jerk. You know Sally. Like, come on. What's wrong with her? She's been encountering Jesus. Why isn't she different? So you can blame other people, but it's also you too. Anyway, no, why am I not different? Why has nothing changed for me? Why don't I feel healed? Right? In this encounter with Jesus that supposedly changes things, why hasn't it changed me? To answer that, it's going to sound, just got to stick with me, okay? Anybody ever seen Moana? Oh, come on, we've all seen it, we've all seen it. I grew up with 5 sisters. I now have 8 nieces. I've seen a lot of Disney princess movies. I watched Moana without any of them, but that doesn't matter. Right? Okay. We've all seen a Disney princess movie or two. Okay. The movie, we've all seen it, but if you haven't seen it, the movie, again, it centers on the life of Moana. Great. Moana is this girl that lives on the Polynesian islands. Great. But she's called to be the hero of this story. The long story short, just go watch the movie. But the long story short, at the beginning we're told the mythic tale of where this all came from. There's this mythic island creature called Te Fiti. And at the beginning, she loses her heart. She has her heart stolen. It's this little green stone thing. Loses it, and because of that, death and darkness begin to invade the world, and it's going to destroy the entire world. And so the hope is that one day someone will come and restore the heart of Te Fiti. Great. Who do you think it's going to be? Moana. Good job. So Moana is called to go and to restore the heart, to go again, face death, darkness, all of it, and restore the heart of Te Fiti. Great. Anyway, spoiler alert, but it's a Disney movie, so I bet you know how this one's going to end. But spoiler alert, at the end, there's an ending scene towards the end where Moana is approaching this stone, scary lava creature, who again, spoiler alert, is Te Fiti. But it's Te Fiti that's had her heart stolen, and Te Fiti that's now an angry and bitter and stony sort of a person, right? Because she's had her heart stolen, Te Fiti's become this different sort of creature. She's a real mess. And then Moana says, she sings, I'm not going to sing it, don't worry. That would be very embarrassing for all of us. No, she sings, I've crossed the horizon to find you. I know your name. And as I was watching this entire movie, I was just like, dude, they plagiarized this entire thing from Jesus. This is literally just the Jesus story, and they plagiarized it straight out of the Bible and threw it in a kid's movie, which is what Disney often does. Anyway, but no, so that's what's going on. She approaches Te Fiti and says, I've crossed the horizon to find you, I know your name. But it's just the Jesus story. Jesus, God, what does he do? He crosses the horizon of heaven to come down to earth. He crosses the horizon of eternity to come down into time. Even on earth, he crosses the horizon from the cradle in Bethlehem all the way to the top of Mount Calvary. Why? To find you. And not just y'all, but to find you. Jesus says, I know you. I know your name. Again, very, very important. He comes to find you. And then, again, Moana sings what? Anybody want to sing it? I'm just kidding. No, we're not going to do that. Then Moana sings to this lava creature, they've stolen the heart from inside you. They've stolen the heart from inside. I'm just kidding. Okay. They've stolen the heart from inside you. And again, I see it, you see it all the time. We see it all the time. People that have had their hearts ripped out from inside them. People that have had holes punched in their soul in so many different ways. Again, whether that's through actual serious trauma or abuse or neglect, or whether that's just through daily life. Again, things we never really noticed before. It's just, again, the daily life, the daily grind that's really beat us down. In big ways and in small ways, all of us have experienced that. All of us have. It's just part of the condition of sin that we live in. Satan, the world, the flesh, all of it. It just beats us down. That's what it does. But then what do? How do we respond to this? We start to try to find all these ways, because we know that we can't actually fix it, we just try to find ways to deal with it. And we do that with our sin. That's 99.99% of the sins that we commit is just dealing with this that we've experienced. It's the reason that we become an angry person or kind of bitter or resentful. It's even, again, it sounds weird, but it's even why we're impatient with people. It's why we get frustrated with people's dumb quirks that they have. It's just like, he's just a quirky dude. Why are you so upset? But we get upset at things like that. We turn to ways just to numb out that feeling we have. Again, this is why I mention all the time, yeah, sure, some people use booze, but nowadays we use this new booze called Netflix. Like Netflix is the new thing we use. Do you know why everyone was so upset that TikTok almost got banned? Because it's so fun, Father. Sure, but also it's a huge dopamine hit. Just scrolling on TikTok all day. It's a new drug. It literally is a new drug. Right? We find all of these ways, those and many, many more, to just deal with it, to cope with it. Great. That's us, though. We've had our hearts stolen from inside of us. They've stolen the heart from inside you. But this does not define you, right? This does not define you, then Moana sings. This does not define you. This is not who you are. Then, spoiler, she places the heart back into Fidi. And then in this big transformative scene, the stones fall away from her. All of a sudden, she's transformed, renewed, healed. Tefiti comes back to life. Okay, again, the Lord in the Eucharist, what he does, he journeys across the horizon of heaven and earth to give himself to us so totally, so absolutely, especially in the Eucharist, and he just says, here's my heart. Take this. In all those places that you've been hurt, all those places that you've been wounded, all those parts of your life where a hole has been punched in your soul, take my heart. And he gives it to us to heal us. He just says, take it here. It's yours. Didn't think you could learn so much from Moana, huh? It's hidden in all these great movies. That's great. Okay. But this is just it. Jesus in the Eucharist, he gives us his heart. Do you remember a couple of months ago, it was several months ago, it was back at Corpus Christi, I talked about how when the Eucharist, when there's all those Eucharistic miracles, when the Eucharist, the bread in the Eucharist actually physically changes into flesh and blood, not just sacramentally, but physically changes into flesh and blood, what kind of flesh does it always change into? A plus. Look at you guys go. It always changes into heart tissue. Every single time. It's heart tissue. Jesus is just beating us over the head and saying, look at this. I'm giving you my heart. Why? Go to Moana for this healing that we need. Our heart's been stolen, and he gives us his. So my simple plug today, very simple. During this whole renewing series that we're going to start in a couple of weeks, I want to encourage you to make the time to do a holy hour each and every single week. You know, during Lent, we do that 40 for 40 thing. We have adoration from Sunday afternoon all the way until Tuesday, 40 straight hours. We're going to do that, but we're just going to start it a few weeks early. Woo, 3 whole extra weeks. Man, it's going to be rough. But 3 extra weeks, we're going to do that so that during all of renewing, we can have that time with our Lord in the Eucharist, where he gives us his heart. He places his heart before us. So that's my simple pitch, right? Is to because in the Eucharist, right, Jesus gives us his heart. We just need to take the time to be there. We all know this, right? If something's important to you, you make the time for it. If you love your kids, you make time for them. That's why you drive them to all those things, because you love them. But if we want this relationship with Jesus, one of the most simplest things to do is just to make the time for that. So back to the question. Now we can finally answer it. It's a very simple answer, but I wanted to talk about Moana. Very simple answer. Why, after someone's been receiving the Eucharist for decades, encountering Jesus for decades, my whole life, Father, come on. Why are they still a jerk? Why have I not changed? Why does nothing feel different in my life? 2 things, simple. 1, I think it's because we don't give them the time. Again, it's like you see your best friend on the street, you encounter them, and you're just like, oh, can't talk now, gotta go. Sure, you encountered them, but that didn't count. We need to give them the time. But then 2, I think it's because we haven't truly opened our heart to him. Maybe we never knew how to do that. Maybe we didn't know we were supposed to do that. But when we open our heart, that's when he can work, and that's when he can enter in and do something. Again, anybody ever had a shallow conversation with their best friend? Hey, how is the weather going? Oh, good. Have a good life. Okay, bye. It's very shallow. But like when you actually open your heart to your friend, that's when you can have a real heart-to-heart conversation, you know. Same thing. We have to give him our time, and then we have to open up to that. And during renewing, that's what we'll be talking about for the majority of the time, is just learning how to recognize and to open our hearts to him. Why? So that he can enter in and heal us. I want to close with just a beautiful quote from Pope Francis, who stole my idea, as usual. But Pope Francis, he was preaching on the Eucharist a couple of years ago, and he said this, only love, right? Only love can heal at the root and free us from the self-centeredness that imprisons us. Remember how Jesus said he's going to come and free the captives? He's not talking about a jailbreak down at El Dorado Penitentiary. He's not talking about that. He's talking about the captivity we face in our lives. Right? Only love can free us from the self-centeredness that imprisons us. And that is what Jesus does, Pope Francis says. He approaches us gently in the disarming simplicity of the host. He comes as bread broken in order to break open the shells of our selfishness. He gives of himself in order to teach us that only by opening our hearts can we be set free from our interior barriers and from the paralysis of our heart. Stole it from me. Right, so in the Eucharist, again, this is what Jesus is doing. Right? Christ asks you to open your heart to him so that he can give you a new heart. That healing that we're searching for, that healing that we know we need, he's offering it to us. We simply have to give him the time and take that opportunity to open ourselves up. He's journeyed across the horizon, right, from heaven to earth in order to do this. Our simple task is to open ourselves to that, to receive that, and to receive that healing that he so desperately wants to give to us.